You just got that promotion. That investment finally paid off. Maybe you inherited something substantial, and the first thing you want to do is tell someone, isn't it? Share the victory, post about it, let people know you've made it. I understand that impulse. I've watched it destroy more lives than poverty ever could. Listen to me carefully. I am Solomon, the man who possessed wealth beyond measure, who commanded kingdoms and built empires that lasted centuries. And I'm telling you this because I've seen what happens when fortune finds the unprepared mind. I've witnessed the rise and the inevitable fall that follows when wealth becomes a public spectacle instead of a private weapon. You think money is freedom, but without wisdom, it becomes the heaviest chain you'll ever wear. Every lottery winner who dies broke, every entrepreneur who builds an empire only to watch it crumble, every inheritance that turns families into enemies, they all made the same fatal mistake. They forgot that true power moves in silence. What I'm about to share with you isn't some feel-good motivation. This is the architecture of lasting wealth, the same principles that allowed the Medici to rule for centuries, the same strategy that keeps generational fortunes intact, while others burn through millions in mere years. This isn't about becoming rich. Anyone can stumble into money. This is about becoming the kind of person who can hold onto power when the world tries to take it from you. The kind of person who builds legacies, not just bank accounts. If you're tired of watching opportunities slip through your fingers, if you're ready to think like those who actually keep their wealth instead of just earning it, then you need to hear every word of what comes next. Because today, you stop being the person money happens to, and you start being the person money obeys. Hit that subscribe button now. Not because I'm asking, but because what you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you see every dollar that comes into your life from this moment forward. Number 1, the nature of sudden fortune. You wake up one morning and your life has changed forever. Maybe it was that cryptocurrency investment you forgot about. Maybe your startup finally sold. Maybe someone you barely remembered left you everything they owned. The numbers on your screen don't feel real. Your heart pounds, your hands shake, and in that moment you think you've won the game of life. But I'm here to tell you something that will chill you to the bone. That moment, that exact moment when fortune finds you unprepared, might be the beginning of your destruction. I have watched this story unfold across centuries. From the merchant who discovered a chest of gold to the peasant who inherited a kingdom. From the modern lottery winner to the tech entrepreneur who sold at the peak. They all share the same tragic arc. They all believed that money was the solution to every problem they ever had. The truth is far more terrifying. Sudden wealth doesn't solve your problems. It magnifies them. It takes every weakness in your character, every flaw in your relationships, every crack in your foundation, and turns them into earthquakes that will shake your world apart. Think of wealth as a powerful river that suddenly changes course and flows directly through your life. If you have no channels built, no structures in place, no wisdom to direct its flow, that river will not nourish your land. It will flood everything you hold dear and wash away the very ground you stand on. Consider Jack Whittaker, a successful businessman who thought he understood money. Then he won $315 million in the lottery. Within months, his granddaughter was dead from a drug overdose. His daughter followed. His marriage crumbled. His friends became enemies. Thieves broke into his car repeatedly, stealing hundreds of thousands in cash he carelessly carried. The man who had everything lost everything that mattered, including his will to live. But Jack wasn't unlucky. Jack was unprepared. And preparation isn't about financial planning. It's about understanding that sudden wealth is like being handed a sword when you've only ever held a pen. Without training, without wisdom, without the right mindset, that sword will cut you before it protects you. The statistics are merciless. More than half of all lottery winners are broke within 5 years. Not struggling, broke. These are people who had more money than most will see in 10 lifetimes, and they lost it all faster than they earned their first dollar. Divorce rates among sudden wealth recipients are astronomical. Addiction, depression, suicide, all spike dramatically when unprepared minds encounter life-changing money. Why does this happen? Because money doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. If you're undisciplined, money will fund your chaos. If you're insecure, money will amplify your need for validation. If you have poor boundaries, money will attract every parasite and predator in your orbit. The moment fortune arrives, you face a choice that will determine whether you build a legacy or become a cautionary tale. You can see this windfall as permission to indulge every impulse and desire, or you can see it as raw material that must be forged into something enduring through wisdom and discipline. Most choose indulgence. They buy the cars, the houses, the lifestyle. They tell everyone. They celebrate publicly. They act as if the money will always be there, as if it multiplied by itself, as if they somehow deserved it without earning it. They treat their fortune like a carnival prize, instead of a responsibility that demands reverence and strategy. Here's what you must understand. The universe doesn't care that you have money now. The market doesn't care. Your creditors don't care. Time doesn't care. They will all continue to move according to their own laws, and if you don't learn those laws quickly, they will separate you from your wealth with the same indifference with which they delivered it. True wealth isn't about the size of your bank account. It's about your ability to create, preserve, and multiply resources over time. It's about building systems that generate abundance even when you're sleeping. It's about developing the wisdom to know when to hold and when to fold, when to spend and when to save, when to be generous and when to be ruthless. The greatest tragedy of sudden wealth isn't losing the money. It's losing yourself in the process. It's becoming someone you don't recognize, surrounded by people who only love your balance sheet, living a life that looks successful from the outside but feels empty within. Sudden fortune is not a blessing or a curse. It's a test of your character, your wisdom, your discipline, and your ability to think beyond the present moment. Most fail this test not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack preparation. They were never taught that money is a tool, not a destination. They were never taught that wealth without wisdom is just elaborate poverty waiting to happen. If fortune has found you unprepared, you have one chance to get this right. Not next year, not next month, right now. Because every day you spend celebrating instead of strategizing, every moment you waste on pleasure instead of preparation, is a step closer to joining the ranks of those who had everything and lost it all. The question isn't whether you deserve this money. The question is whether you're worthy of keeping it. Number 2, discretion and protective structures. You want to tell the world about your success. You want to post the photo of your new house, drive the car that announces your arrival, wear the watch that speaks before you do. I understand this desire. It's human nature to want recognition for our achievements. But this desire, this need to be seen and acknowledged, is the very thing that will destroy everything you've worked to build. True power moves in shadows. True wealth whispers while poverty shouts. The moment you make your fortune visible, you transform from a predator into prey, from a player into a target, from someone who controls wealth into someone wealth controls. I want you to imagine 2 kingdoms. In the first, the king parades his gold through the streets every day. His treasury doors are open. His wealth gleams in the sunlight for all to see. Every citizen knows exactly how much he has and where he keeps it. In the second kingdom, the king dresses like a merchant. His gold is hidden in vaults beneath vaults, protected by walls within walls. No one knows how much he truly possesses, or where his real power lies. Which king sleeps peacefully at night? Which kingdom survives when wolves circle and enemies plot? The Rothschild family understood this principle better than any dynasty in history. For over 2 centuries, they have financed wars, toppled governments, and shaped the destiny of nations. Yet walk past them on the street and you would never know. They drive modest cars, live in understated homes, and dress with quiet elegance rather than flashy extravagance. Their true wealth isn't in what you can see, it's in what you can't. This is the difference between having money and understanding money. Having money means you possess it temporarily. Understanding money means you possess it permanently, because you know how to make it invisible to those who would take it from you. Every dollar you display is a dollar that attracts attention you don't want. Every symbol of wealth you wear is a target you paint on your back. Every time you announce your success, you're not celebrating, you're advertising. And in this world, advertising wealth is like advertising weakness. Cesar Borgia learned this lesson through blood and betrayal. When he was powerful, he made sure everyone knew it. He flaunted his conquests, displayed his riches, and ruled through fear and spectacle. But visibility made him vulnerable. His enemies could see exactly what he had and plot exactly how to take it. The moment his power waned, everything he had accumulated became everything he lost. The smart money builds fortresses, not monuments. It creates structures that protect wealth from every angle. Legal structures that shield assets from lawsuits and creditors, trust structures that separate ownership from control, corporate structures that create layers between you and your money. These aren't just financial instruments. They're weapons of financial warfare, and in this war, your enemies can't attack what they can't see. You need to start thinking like a general protecting a city under siege. Your wealth is that city, and everyone around you is potentially laying siege to it, whether they realize it or not. Your family expects you to fund their dreams. Your friends expect you to pick up every check. Strangers expect you to solve their problems. Governments expect you to pay ever-increasing taxes. Criminals expect you to be an easy target. The only defense against these expectations is invisibility. When people don't know what you have, they can't resent you for not sharing it. When they can't see your wealth, they can't plot to separate you from it. When your fortune is hidden behind legal walls and corporate veils, it becomes untouchable to those who would destroy you through envy, lawsuits, or pure greed. This isn't about being secretive for the sake of secrecy. This is about survival. In nature, the most successful predators are invisible to their prey, and the most successful prey are invisible to their predators. Wealth makes you both predator and prey simultaneously. You're hunting opportunities while others are hunting you. Your success depends on staying hidden while you strike. Start building your financial fortress today. Create multiple legal entities. Establish trusts that separate you from direct ownership. Set up companies in jurisdictions that protect privacy. Work with lawyers who specialize in asset protection, not just wealth accumulation. These structures aren't expensive compared to losing everything because you failed to protect it. But remember, the most sophisticated legal structure in the world won't save you if you can't keep your mouth shut. The moment you start bragging about your offshore accounts or your complex trust arrangements, you've defeated the entire purpose. Discretion isn't just about hiding your wealth from others. It's about training yourself to find validation from within, not from the admiration or envy of people who don't understand what you've built. The greatest fortune in history wasn't the one everyone could see. It was the one no one suspected existed. Your goal isn't to look rich. Your goal is to be wealthy, and these are completely different objectives that require completely different strategies. Build your empire in the darkness. Let others compete for attention while you compete for results. When they're posting photos of their purchases, you're purchasing assets that generate income. When they're announcing their victories, you're planning your next move. When they're seeking applause, you're seeking compound growth. True wealth doesn't need an audience. It needs only time, wisdom, and the discipline to remain invisible until it becomes unstoppable. Number 3, work and discipline after getting rich. The money hits your account and suddenly everything changes. The alarm clock becomes optional. The daily grind feels like a choice rather than a necessity. You could quit tomorrow and never worry about bills again. So why don't you? Why do some of the richest people in the world still work 70-hour weeks when they could retire to private islands and never lift a finger again? Because they understand something that destroys most people who suddenly come into wealth. They understand that work isn't punishment for not having money. Work is medicine for having too much of it. When you remove the necessity to work, you remove more than just a source of income. You remove structure, purpose, identity, and the daily discipline that shaped you into someone capable of handling wealth in the first place. Most people think work is what you do until you get rich enough to stop. But work is actually what keeps you rich enough to stay free. Picture a river that has carved its path through rock over thousands of years. That river has power because it never stops moving, never stops cutting deeper, never stops finding its way forward. The moment that river stops flowing, it doesn't become a peaceful lake. It becomes a stagnant pond that breeds disease and decay. Your mind is that river. Work is the current that keeps it sharp, focused, and powerful. Without that current, your mind doesn't rest. It rots. Jeff Bezos didn't retire when Amazon made him the richest man in the world. Warren Buffett didn't stop working when he had more money than he could spend in 100 lifetimes. These men understand that wealth without purpose is just elaborate imprisonment. They work not because they have to, but because work is what transforms money from a burden into a tool. But here's the critical distinction. You don't keep working at jobs that drain your soul. You don't stay in careers that were only tolerable because you needed the paycheck. When money removes necessity, it should reveal authenticity. The work you do after getting rich should be the work you were meant to do all along, freed from the constraints of survival and financial desperation. Machiavelli warned that idleness breeds weakness, and weakness invites attacks from those who remain disciplined while you grew soft. When you stop working, you don't just stop earning. You stop growing. You stop adapting. You stop being the kind of person who could earn that wealth again if you lost it all tomorrow. I've seen brilliant entrepreneurs become lazy investors and watch their fortunes evaporate. I've seen disciplined professionals become undisciplined rich people and lose not just their money, but their minds. The skills that got you wealthy are the same skills that will keep you wealthy, and those skills atrophy the moment you decide you don't need them anymore. Work after wealth isn't about the money. It's about maintaining the mental and emotional muscle memory that attracted wealth in the first place. It's about staying connected to the creative force that builds rather than just consumes. It's about keeping your identity rooted in what you do, not just what you own. But you must choose your work strategically. This isn't about grinding for the sake of grinding. This isn't about staying busy to avoid facing your success. This is about channeling your energy toward projects that fulfill you, challenges that grow you, and missions that matter beyond your bank account. Perhaps you start the business you always dreamed of but couldn't afford to risk. Perhaps you write the book that's been waiting inside you. Perhaps you dedicate yourself to solving problems that go beyond profit and venture into purpose. The key is to work from choice, not compulsion, from passion, not desperation. The biggest trap wealthy people fall into is thinking that money has made work optional. Money has made bad work optional. It has made soul-crushing jobs optional. It has made working for people who don't respect you optional. But work itself, meaningful work that engages your mind and exercises your capabilities, isn't optional if you want to remain the kind of person worthy of wealth. Your daily routine doesn't have to revolve around making money anymore, but it still needs to revolve around making progress. Progress on yourself, progress on your projects, progress on your contribution to the world around you. Without progress, wealth becomes a weight that pulls you down instead of wings that lift you up. Set boundaries around your work. Don't let it consume you the way it might have when you were desperate for money. But don't abandon it entirely, because that abandonment is often the first step toward abandoning everything else that made you successful. The moment you decide you're too rich to work is the moment you begin the process of becoming too poor to retire. Stay hungry, not for money, but for growth. Stay disciplined, not out of fear, but out of respect for the principles that brought you this far. Work is not what you do until you succeed. Work is what successful people never stop doing, because they understand that success is not a destination where you arrive and rest. Success is a direction you keep traveling, and work is the vehicle that gets you there. Choose your work wisely, but never choose to stop working entirely. The graveyard of lost fortunes is filled with people who thought money was permission to stop being the person they needed to be to keep that money. Number 4, debt elimination and psychological sovereignty. There's a chain around your neck that you've grown so accustomed to wearing, you've forgotten it's there. You call it a mortgage, a car payment, a credit card balance, a student loan, but I call it what it truly is. A leash that keeps you tethered to a system, designed to extract your freedom one payment at a time. You think debt is normal. You think it's smart. You've been told that leveraging other people's money is how wealthy people think, but let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. Every dollar you owe is a vote you've cast against your own sovereignty. Every interest payment is a tribute you pay to remain enslaved. And every month you carry a balance is another month you postpone your true independence. Debt is not a financial instrument. It's a psychological weapon, and it's pointed directly at your peace of mind. Imagine you're a king, but there are foreign armies stationed in your territory. They demand tribute every month. They have the power to seize your possessions if you fail to pay. They can destroy your credit, foreclose on your castle, and turn your subjects against you. Are you really a king, or are you just a vassal who wears a crown? This is what debt does to your wealth. It doesn't matter how much money you have if a significant portion of it is already promised to someone else. It doesn't matter how much you earn if your creditors have the first claim on your future income. You're not building wealth. You're renting the illusion of wealth from institutions that profit from your inability to truly own anything. Machiavelli taught that a prince must eliminate internal threats before facing external ones, because enemies within your walls are far more dangerous than armies outside your gates. Your debts are those internal enemies. They whisper doubt into your decisions. They steal your sleep with worry about payments. They make you conservative when you should be bold and desperate when you should be patient. High-interest debt is particularly insidious. Credit card debt at 18% interest means you're paying nearly 1/5 of your balance every year just for the privilege of owing money. That's not borrowing. That's financial suicide in slow motion. Student loans that follow you to the grave. Car payments on depreciating assets. Lines of credit that enable lifestyle inflation rather than wealth building. Every monthly payment you make to service debt is money that could have been invested in appreciating assets. Every dollar in interest is a dollar that will never work for you, because you've sentenced it to work for someone else forever. The mathematics are brutal. A $1,000 credit card balance at minimum payments will take you over a decade to pay off and cost you more in interest than the original purchase. But the psychological damage is even worse than the financial cost. Debt creates a scarcity mindset that infects every financial decision you make. When you owe money, you think like someone who owes money. You make choices from a position of weakness rather than strength. You become risk-averse, not because the risks are too high, but because you can't afford to take any risks at all. The path to true wealth begins with a declaration of war against every debt in your life. Not next year when you're more organized. Not after you maximize your tax advantages. Right now, today, this moment. Because every day you delay is another day. You remain financially enslaved to institutions that grow rich from your procrastination. Start with the highest interest rates first. These are your most expensive enemies, and they must be destroyed without mercy or hesitation. Attack them with every spare dollar until they're eliminated completely. Yes, this might mean living below your means for a while. Yes, this might mean sacrificing some pleasures and conveniences. But what you're sacrificing is temporary comfort in exchange for permanent freedom. The only debt you might consider maintaining is low interest, fixed-rate debt on appreciating assets, particularly if the interest is tax-deductible, and the asset generates income that exceeds the carrying cost. A mortgage on rental property that pays for itself while building equity. But even these strategic debts should be approached with caution and paid off as soon as practical. Once you eliminate your debts, something miraculous happens. Every dollar you earn becomes a dollar you can deploy strategically rather than defensively. Every investment decision comes from a position of strength rather than desperation. Every opportunity can be evaluated on its merits, rather than through the lens of whether you can afford the payments. More importantly, you sleep differently when you owe nothing to anyone. You wake up every morning knowing that your financial obligations are choices, not chains. You negotiate from power instead of pleading from weakness. You think long-term instead of scrambling month to month. The richest people in history understood that debt is a tool that works best when used sparingly and strategically, not as a lifestyle choice or a shortcut to immediate gratification. They borrowed to acquire assets that generated more income than the borrowing cost, then paid off those debts as quickly as possible to maximize their ownership and minimize their risk. Your goal is not to manage debt efficiently. Your goal is to eliminate debt entirely, so that every dollar of wealth you build belongs completely to you and can be deployed entirely according to your will, not according to the demands of creditors who care nothing for your dreams and everything for their profits. Financial freedom isn't about having enough money to make all your payments comfortably. Financial freedom is about having no payments to make at all. Number 5. Emotional management and relationship boundaries. The moment money enters your life, everyone around you changes. Or perhaps more accurately, everyone around you reveals who they always were beneath the surface. Your success becomes their opportunity. Your good fortune becomes their entitlement. Your wealth becomes their emergency fund, their retirement plan, their solution to problems you didn't create and challenges you didn't cause. This revelation is more painful than losing money. This is losing illusions about people you thought you knew and loved. You'll watch friends calculate the value of your friendship based on your ability to fund their dreams. You'll see family members who barely spoke to you suddenly become concerned about your well-being, your investments, your future plans. You'll discover that your generosity isn't seen as kindness but as obligation, and your boundaries aren't respected as wisdom but resented as selfishness. Welcome to the most dangerous aspect of wealth. Managing the emotions of people who believe your success somehow diminishes their own, or worse, that your success creates a debt you owe to them simply for existing in their orbit. Picture yourself as a tree that suddenly bears golden fruit. Every person in your life becomes someone who believes they deserve to pick from your branches, simply because they knew you when you were a sapling. They don't see the years of patient growth, the weathering of storms, the deep roots you develop to support the weight of success. They only see the fruit, and they want their share. The stories they tell themselves are seductive and convincing. They were there for you when times were tough, so now you should be there for them. They supported your dreams, so now you should fund theirs. They're family, so your obligation to help them is not just moral but blood-bound. They're struggling while you're thriving, so basic human decency demands you redistribute your good fortune. These narratives sound reasonable until you realize they're built on a foundation of emotional manipulation, designed to extract resources from you while offering nothing sustainable in return. The person who loans money to friends and family isn't being generous. They're being naive. They're confusing enabling with helping, and they're about to learn the difference through expensive and painful experience. Here's what you must understand. Money changes the power dynamics of every relationship, and most people cannot handle that change gracefully. Your wealth forces them to confront their own financial inadequacy, their own unfulfilled ambitions, their own choices that led them to need your help instead of being able to offer their own. Rather than take responsibility for their situation, many will choose to make you responsible for their solution. They'll use guilt, manipulation, sob stories, and emotional blackmail to convince you that your success creates an obligation to solve their problems. They'll make their emergency your priority, and their poor planning your problem. The solution is not to become cold or cruel. The solution is to become strategically compassionate. This means helping in ways that don't create dependency, solving problems without becoming the permanent solution, and giving gifts without creating expectations for future gifts. When someone you care about faces a genuine emergency, help them once with a gift, not a loan. Make it clear that this is a one-time assistance, that you're not establishing a pattern, and that future financial independence is their responsibility to create. Give enough to solve the immediate crisis, but not enough to eliminate their motivation to solve the underlying problem. Never lend money to friends or family unless you're prepared to lose both the money and the relationship. Money loaned to people who don't have the financial discipline to avoid needing loans in the first place is money you'll never see again. Plus, you'll gain a resentful debtor who avoids you because your presence reminds them of their failure to repay you. Set clear boundaries and communicate them clearly. Explain that your policy is not to discuss financial assistance beyond genuine emergencies, not to co-sign loans or guarantee debts, and not to become anyone's personal bank or investment fund. These aren't cruel restrictions. They're protective measures that preserve relationships by preventing the resentment that always follows financial entanglement. You'll be amazed how quickly you can identify people's true intentions once you establish and enforce these boundaries. Those who respect your limits and continue to value your relationship for reasons beyond your bank account are worth keeping close. Those who become hostile, distant, or manipulative when they realize they can't access your wealth are showing you exactly who they always were, and you should be grateful for the clarity. Remember, your wealth is not community property. You didn't win the lottery for everyone you've ever met. You didn't build a business to fund everyone else's retirement. Your success doesn't obligate you to subsidize other people's poor choices or lack of ambition. The most loving thing you can do for people who come to you for money is to refuse to enable their dependence on your resources. Help them develop their own capabilities, connections, and confidence. Teach them to fish rather than giving them fish, and watch how many of them suddenly lose interest in spending time with you. Your job is not to be everyone's financial savior. Your job is to protect and preserve what you've built so you can continue being successful enough to help others, but only on your terms and according to your values. Wealth without boundaries is not generosity. It's the slow suicide of someone who mistakes being needed for being loved. Number 6, unchecked generosity and ruin. You want to be loved. You want to be needed. You want to be the hero who swoops in and saves everyone from their problems, their debts, their poor choices, and their impossible dreams. This desire is beautiful, noble, and will destroy you more efficiently than any vice, any enemy, or any market crash you'll ever face. Unchecked generosity isn't kindness. It's weakness disguised as virtue, and it has bankrupted more wealthy people than bad investments, economic downturns, and natural disasters combined. I want you to understand something that will save you from financial and emotional ruin: the difference between being generous and being generous to a fault. Generosity is giving from abundance to create positive impact. Being generous to a fault is giving from compulsion to avoid negative emotions, to buy approval, or to maintain a self-image that requires you to be everyone's financial solution. Think of yourself as the sun. The sun gives warmth and light to everything in the solar system, but it maintains its distance. It nurtures life without being consumed by the demands of every planet that orbits around it. The sun doesn't burn itself out trying to make every world tropical. It gives consistently, but within limits that preserve its own power for eternity. Now imagine a sun that tried to satisfy every planet's individual needs for heat and light. A sun that moved closer to warm the cold planets and dimmed itself to cool the hot ones. That sun wouldn't last a season, and when it burned out, every world that depended on it would die in the darkness. Mike Tyson earned over $400 million during his boxing career and lost nearly all of it. Not to bad investments, not to market crashes, not to fraud or theft. He lost it by trying to take care of everyone who claimed to need his help. He bought cars for acquaintances, houses for distant relatives, jewelry for friends who couldn't afford their own. He funded lifestyles, habits, and dreams for dozens of people who saw his generosity not as kindness, but as weakness to exploit. By the time Tyson realized what was happening, he wasn't surrounded by people who cared about him. He was surrounded by people who cared about his ability to pay for their lives. When the money ran out, so did they. He learned the hardest lesson wealth can teach. Unlimited generosity creates unlimited demands, and unlimited demands create unlimited resentment when you finally have to say no. The people who benefit from your unchecked generosity will never be satisfied because their problem isn't lack of money. Their problem is lack of self-sufficiency, and no amount of your money will ever solve that. In fact, your money makes their problem worse by removing their motivation to develop the skills, habits, and mindset needed to create their own abundance. You become their drug dealer, and money becomes their drug. They develop a tolerance that requires ever larger amounts to achieve the same emotional satisfaction. They become dependent on your generosity for their lifestyle, their self-esteem, and their solution to every challenge they face. And like any dealer, you'll eventually discover that your customers don't love you. They love what you provide, and they'll hate you the moment you stop providing it. Machiavelli understood this principle in governance. A leader who tries to make everyone happy ends up making everyone angry, because it's impossible to satisfy unlimited demands with limited resources, even when those resources seem unlimited. The ruler who gives everything to everyone soon has nothing left to give, and no power left to protect himself when the recipients of his generosity turn against him. But the deeper problem with unchecked generosity isn't financial. It's psychological. When you consistently give more than you receive, you create an imbalance that breeds resentment on both sides of the transaction. You begin to resent the people you're helping because they never seem grateful enough, never seem to improve their situation despite your assistance, and never seem to reach a point where they stop needing your help. Meanwhile, they begin to resent you because your generosity makes them feel inferior, dependent, and obligated. Your gifts become reminders of their inadequacy rather than expressions of your care. They start to see your wealth not as something you earned, but as something you're hoarding from them, and your generosity not as kindness, but as the minimum payment you owe for being successful while they struggle. The solution is not to become selfish. The solution is to become strategically generous. This means giving with clear boundaries, specific purposes, and defined limits. It means helping people build capabilities rather than funding their dependencies. It means saying no to requests that don't serve the other person's long-term development, even when saying no feels heartless in the moment. True generosity creates independence, not dependence. It teaches people to fish rather than providing them with fish. It empowers people to solve their own problems rather than solving their problems for them. It gives people tools, opportunities, and education, not money, lifestyle subsidies, and bailouts from the consequences of their choices. Set limits on your generosity and communicate those limits clearly. Decide how much you're willing to give to any individual or cause in a year, and stick to that limit regardless of emergencies, sob stories, or emotional manipulation. This isn't cruel. This is responsible stewardship of resources that took discipline and sacrifice to accumulate. Remember, you can't save everyone, and trying to save everyone will prevent you from helping anyone effectively. Your job is not to fund other people's lives. Your job is to build something sustainable that can create opportunities and value for generations, not just solve temporary problems for people who haven't learned to solve their own problems. The most generous thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's dependence on your wealth. Help them build their own strength, and watch how many of them suddenly prefer to stay weak. Number 7. Capital preservation and spending returns. You've built something magnificent. Years of discipline, sacrifice, and strategic thinking have culminated in a sum of money that could change not just your life, but the lives of your children and their children. And now you face the most dangerous moment in your entire financial journey, the temptation to spend the principal. This is where most wealth dies. Not in market crashes, not in economic disasters, not in theft or fraud, but in the quiet, gradual erosion that occurs when people mistake having money for understanding money, when they confuse being rich with being wealthy, when they spend the tree instead of eating only its fruit. Let me paint you a picture that will either save your fortune or haunt your dreams. Imagine you own a magical tree that produces golden apples every year. Each apple can feed you for a month. The tree produces enough apples to sustain you comfortably for life. And if you care for the tree properly, it will continue producing apples for your children and grandchildren long after you're gone. Now imagine you get hungry one day and decide to chop down the tree for firewood to cook a feast. The meal is magnificent, the best you've ever tasted, but when it's over, you're left with ashes and the certainty that you'll never eat again. This is exactly what happens when you spend your capital instead of living off the returns. Your principal is that magical tree. The investment returns, the dividends, the rental income, the business profits, these are the golden apples it produces year after year. The moment you start consuming the principal, you're not living wealthily. You're burning through wealth with an expiration date. The mathematics are simple but unforgiving. If you have $5 million and you spend $200,000 per year without earning returns, you'll be broke in 25 years. But if you invest that $5 million to generate a conservative 4 to 6% annual return, you can spend $200,000 to $300,000 per year forever without ever touching the principal. Forever. Your great-grandchildren could live off the same capital you preserved today. But most people can't resist the temptation to dip into the principal just once. Just this one time for a special purchase, a special opportunity, a special emergency that justifies breaking the rule. And then they do it again. And again, until the magical tree has been chopped down branch by branch, and they're left wondering where their wealth disappeared. The discipline to preserve capital requires you to completely change your relationship with money. You must stop thinking of your net worth as your spending limit and start thinking of it as a productive asset that works for you while you sleep. Your job is not to spend the money. Your job is to protect the money so it can generate the income you actually spend. This requires precise calculations and absolute discipline. Determine how much annual income you need to maintain your desired lifestyle. Multiply that number by 20 to 25, and that's the minimum capital base you must preserve untouched forever. If you need $100,000 per year, you need $2.5 million in capital. If you need $300,000 per year, you need $7.5 million in capital. These aren't suggestions. These are mathematical requirements for sustainable wealth. Everything above that minimum capital base can be used more aggressively for growth, opportunities, or yes, even some carefully planned splurges. But that foundational amount is sacred. It's the golden tree that must never be cut down, no matter how hungry you get or how appealing the immediate gratification appears. The wealthy understand this principle instinctively. They don't buy yachts with their principal. They buy yachts with the profits their principal generates. They don't fund their lifestyle by liquidating assets. They fund their lifestyle by acquiring assets that generate enough passive income to support their lifestyle permanently. This approach requires patience and long-term thinking that most people can't maintain. It means saying no to immediate pleasures in order to preserve permanent freedom. It means living somewhat below your apparent means in order to live indefinitely within your actual means. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you commit to preserving your principal, you actually become more willing to take calculated risks with the returns. When you know your foundation is secure, you can be more aggressive with your growth strategies. When you know you can't touch the tree, you become very creative about maximizing the fruit it produces. The returns from preserved capital don't just fund your lifestyle. They fund your ability to be generous strategically, to take advantage of opportunities quickly, and to weather economic storms without compromising your long-term security. They provide the peace of mind that comes from knowing you could maintain your standard of living, even if you never earned another dollar from work. Most importantly, preserved capital creates a legacy that extends far beyond your own lifetime. It becomes the foundation for your family's financial education, your children's opportunities, and your grandchildren's security. It transforms your personal success into generational wealth that can make a positive impact on the world long after you're gone. The moment you start spending principal is the moment you begin the countdown to financial extinction. But the moment you commit to living only off returns is the moment you achieve true financial immortality. Your capital is not your money to spend. It's your money to protect so it can provide for you, your family, and your legacy forever. Number 8. Investment as strategic governance. You are no longer just someone who has money. You are now the ruler of a financial kingdom, and every investment decision you make is an act of governance that will determine whether your realm prospers or perishes. The moment you begin thinking of your portfolio as scattered bets rather than strategic deployments of power, you begin the process of losing everything you've worked to build. Investment is not gambling. It's not speculation based on hunches, tips, or trends you read about on social media. Investment is the art of deploying capital like a master general deploys armies, with each dollar serving a specific strategic purpose in a larger campaign to preserve and multiply wealth over time. Imagine you are a medieval king who must defend your territory against every possible threat, while also expanding your influence and securing resources for future generations. You wouldn't put all your soldiers in one castle, no matter how strong that castle appears. You wouldn't invest all your resources in one type of weapon, no matter how effective it seems in the current battle. You would create a defensive system with multiple layers, multiple strategies, and multiple contingencies. Your investment portfolio requires the same strategic thinking. Every dollar is a soldier in your financial army, and you must deploy these soldiers across different battlefields to maximize your chances of victory while minimizing your risk of total defeat. The foundation of your kingdom must be broad, diversified equity investments. These are your infantry, the reliable core of your army that provides steady growth over time through their stake in the productive capacity of the global economy. Index funds that track the total stock market give you ownership in hundreds or thousands of companies simultaneously, spreading your risk while capturing the long-term upward trend of human innovation and productivity. But no kingdom survives on infantry alone. You need your defensive positions, fixed income securities, government bonds, high-grade corporate debt. These investments don't generate the exciting returns that capture headlines, but they provide stability during economic storms and reliable income when stock markets become volatile. They're your castle walls, designed not to win wars but to ensure you survive battles that would otherwise destroy you. Real estate forms another critical component of your strategic deployment. Physical properties, whether residential or commercial, provide both income through rents and protection against inflation, as property values tend to rise with the general price level over time. Real estate investment trusts allow you to participate in property markets without the operational headaches of being a landlord. These are your supply lines, ensuring consistent resources even when other sources of income become disrupted. Then there's your special forces unit, alternative investments that carry higher risk but offer the potential for exceptional returns. Cryptocurrency, growth stocks, startup investments, commodities. These should represent no more than 5 to 10% of your total portfolio, but they provide the asymmetric upside that can accelerate your wealth building significantly when they succeed. Think of these as your cavalry, capable of dramatic victories but too risky to bet the entire kingdom on their success. Finally, you need your strategic reserves, liquid cash holdings that allow you to take advantage of opportunities quickly or weather unexpected emergencies without being forced to sell investments at unfavorable prices. This cash doesn't grow, but it provides the flexibility that separates successful investors from those who are forced to make desperate decisions during difficult times. The key is balance and rebalancing. As market movements change the proportions of your holdings, you must periodically sell high-performing assets and buy underperforming ones to maintain your strategic allocation. This forces you to sell high and buy low systematically, which is the opposite of what most investors do emotionally. Your goal is not to maximize returns in any given year. Your goal is to generate sustainable returns of 6 to 7% annually over decades while protecting your wealth against inflation, market crashes, economic recessions, and geopolitical upheavals. This approach won't make you rich quickly, but it will keep you rich permanently. Study the great financial dynasties throughout history. The Medici family maintained their wealth for centuries not by making spectacular bets, but by building robust systems that could survive wars, plagues, political upheavals, and economic transformations. They understood that preservation comes before growth, and that steady compound returns over long periods create more wealth than dramatic gains followed by devastating losses. The Rothschild family built their fortune by establishing financial operations in multiple countries, multiple currencies, and multiple asset classes. They never concentrated their risk in any single investment or any single geography, which allowed them to profit from global trade and survive local disasters that destroyed their less diversified competitors. Your investment strategy must be designed to outlast your own lifetime. You're not building a portfolio to support yourself for the next few years. You're building a financial dynasty that can support your family for generations and create positive impact on the world long after you're gone. This requires discipline that most people cannot maintain. It requires you to ignore the latest investment fads, resist the temptation to chase performance, and stick to your strategic allocation even when it feels boring or when other people are making money faster with riskier approaches. But remember, those other people are gambling with their wealth. You are governing yours. Gamblers sometimes win big, but they usually lose everything. Governors build systems that endure and create lasting value for everyone they protect. Your money is not just your money. It's the economic engine that will power your family's future and your legacy's impact on the world. Treat it with the reverence and strategic thinking it deserves. Number 9. Expected return and historical examples. The numbers don't lie, even when hope whispers seductive fantasies about getting rich quickly. Throughout history, sustainable wealth has been built on one immutable principle: consistent, compound returns over extended periods of time, not spectacular gains that disappear as quickly as they arrived. Let me give you the mathematical foundation that has created more lasting fortunes than any get-rich-quick scheme ever invented. If you can generate 6 to 7% annual returns on your investments over decades, you will accumulate wealth that most people can't even imagine, and you'll do it with less risk than those chasing higher returns through speculation and gambling. Consider $5 million invested to generate 6% annually. That's $300,000 per year in passive income every year without ever touching the principal. $300,000 that arrives whether you work or not, whether you're healthy or sick, whether the economy is booming or struggling. That's the income of a successful professional, generated entirely by your capital working while you sleep. But here's what most people don't understand. That 6% annual return compounded over time is more powerful than any lottery ticket, any cryptocurrency moonshot, any startup investment, or any speculative trade you'll ever make. Because it's sustainable, because it's predictable, because it doesn't depend on getting lucky once. It depends on being smart consistently. The Medici banking family understood this principle 500 years ago. They didn't build their dynasty by making risky bets on individual ventures. They built it by creating a diversified system of loans, investments, and business interests that generated steady returns across multiple markets and multiple generations. When wars destroyed their investments in one city, their holdings in other cities continued producing income. When plagues disrupted trade in one industry, their investments in other industries kept their wealth growing. The Medicis survived the rise and fall of kingdoms, the collapse of trading routes, and economic upheavals that wiped out their flashier competitors, because they understood that wealth preservation matters more than wealth accumulation. They focused on building systems that could generate returns for centuries, not just years. The Rothschild family employed the same strategy across multiple countries and currencies. Rather than concentrating their wealth in any single investment or geography, they spread their risk across bonds, real estate, mining, railroads, and banking operations throughout Europe. When political upheavals destroyed wealth in one nation, their investments in other nations continued generating returns. When wars disrupted one industry, their holdings in other industries maintained their income. This diversification wasn't just about risk management. It was about creating an engine of wealth that could operate under any economic conditions, in any political environment, through any crisis that might arise. They built their fortune to outlast themselves, their children and their grandchildren, and their strategy worked because it was based on mathematical principles rather than market timing or speculative predictions. But you don't need to be a Medici or a Rothschild to apply these principles. You just need to understand that 6 to 7% annual returns, achieved consistently over time, will make you wealthier than 99% of people who chase higher returns through speculation. Here's why this matters more than any individual investment you'll ever make. Compound interest is the most powerful force in finance, but it only works when you give it time and consistency. $1 million growing at 6% becomes over $5 million in 30 years. $5 million growing at 6% becomes over $28 million in 30 years. The wealth grows exponentially, not linearly, but only if you resist the temptation to disrupt the process by chasing higher returns or spending the principal. Most people destroy this compounding process by getting impatient, getting greedy, or getting scared. They see their portfolio growing steadily at 6% and think they're missing out on opportunities to make money faster. So they abandon their disciplined approach to chase the latest hot investment, and they usually end up losing money instead of making it. Or they see their portfolio decline during a market downturn and panic, selling their investments at exactly the wrong time to preserve what they have left. They turn temporary losses into permanent losses by abandoning their long-term strategy during the short-term volatility that's inevitable in any investment approach. The wealthy don't do this. They stick to their 6 to 7% targets through good markets and bad markets, through exciting opportunities and boring stretches, because they understand that consistency matters more than performance. They know that the person who makes 6% every year for 30 years will end up wealthier than the person who makes 30% one year, loses 20% the next year, and continues riding that emotional roller coaster. Your goal is not to beat the market. Your goal is to match the market's long-term performance while protecting yourself against the market's short-term volatility. This approach requires patience, discipline, and the wisdom to ignore the financial media that profits from making you think you need to constantly adjust your strategy based on the latest economic news. The market will provide 6 to 7% annual returns over time if you let it. But you have to give it time, and you have to give it consistency. The moment you start trying to optimize that return by market timing, sector rotation, or chasing performance, you begin the process of underperforming the very results you were trying to improve. History doesn't reward the clever, it rewards the patient. Build your wealth like the Medicis and the Rothschilds, systematically, sustainably, and with a timeline measured in generations, not quarters. Number 10. Conscious use of wealth and moderate pleasure. You didn't accumulate wealth to become a monk. You didn't sacrifice and strategize and build an empire just to live like a pauper who happens to have a large bank account. The goal of wealth is not to hoard it like a dragon sleeping on gold, but to use it consciously, strategically, and yes, enjoyably, while maintaining the discipline that created it in the first place. But here's the dangerous paradox that destroys most newly wealthy people. The line between conscious enjoyment and unconscious indulgence is razor thin, and once you cross it, you begin the slow descent back to the very financial insecurity you worked so hard to escape. The key is understanding the difference between spending that strengthens your identity and spending that weakens it, between purchases that align with your values and purchases that exist only to signal your wealth to others, between pleasure that enhances your life and pleasure that replaces your life. Think of your wealth as a powerful river that can either nourish the land it flows through or flood and destroy everything in its path. The difference isn't the power of the river. The difference is whether you build channels to direct that power constructively or allow it to flow wherever it wants without guidance or restraint. Set aside a specific percentage of your annual investment returns for personal pleasure and stick to that percentage religiously. This isn't about depriving yourself of the fruits of your labor. This is about ensuring that your enjoyment of wealth doesn't compromise your ability to remain wealthy. Whether it's 5% or 10% or 20% of your annual returns, decide on that number based on your values and your long-term goals. Then spend that money guilt-free on whatever brings you genuine satisfaction. But notice, I said genuine satisfaction, not social validation. There's a world of difference between buying something because it brings you joy and buying something because it makes other people think you're successful. The first type of spending strengthens your identity and reinforces your sense of self. The second type of spending weakens your identity by making it dependent on other people's opinions and approval. A hand-tailored suit that makes you feel confident and powerful is conscious spending. A designer suit that costs 10 times as much but provides no additional satisfaction beyond the logo is unconscious spending. A beautiful home in a location you love, filled with art and furniture that reflect your taste and values, is conscious spending. A mansion in a prestigious neighborhood that you buy because wealthy people are supposed to live in mansions is unconscious spending. The difference isn't the amount you spend. The difference is the intention behind the spending and the satisfaction you derive from it. Conscious spending enhances who you are. Unconscious spending tries to change who you appear to be to others. Here's a test for every significant purchase you're considering. Will you enjoy this purchase as much in private as you would in public? If the honest answer is no, then you're not buying the thing. You're buying other people's reactions to the thing, which means you're allowing your wealth to be controlled by other people's opinions rather than your own values. The truly wealthy understand that money's greatest power isn't the ability to buy anything you want. It's the ability to buy time, freedom, and experiences that align with your deepest values and desires. They use their wealth to eliminate inconveniences, to access opportunities, and to support causes that matter to them, not to impress acquaintances or strangers who judge success by visible symbols rather than actual achievements. This conscious approach to spending extends beyond personal pleasure to the broader question of what you want your wealth to accomplish in the world. After you've secured your own financial future and provided reasonable enjoyment for yourself and your family, your wealth becomes a tool for creating the kind of impact you want to have on the world around you. Perhaps you fund scholarships for students who remind you of your younger self. Perhaps you support research into diseases that affected people you loved. Perhaps you invest in businesses or technology that align with your vision for how the world should develop. Perhaps you simply ensure that your family has opportunities you never had. The point is that your wealth becomes an extension of your values rather than a substitute for them. It amplifies who you already are rather than trying to transform you into someone else. It serves your authentic desires rather than desires you think you should have because of your financial status. But remember, even conscious spending requires limits and discipline. The most expensive mistake you can make is convincing yourself that every purchase is conscious, that every indulgence is aligned with your values, that every expensive decision is justified by your ability to afford it. This rationalization is how people spend themselves out of wealth, while believing they're being strategic about their spending. The goal is not to maximize your spending within your means. The goal is to optimize your spending to create the maximum satisfaction and impact per dollar spent. This often means spending more money on fewer things, buying higher quality items less frequently, and focusing your resources on experiences and assets that provide lasting value rather than temporary gratification. True luxury isn't about having everything you want. True luxury is about wanting only things that are worthy of your wealth, your time, and your attention. It's about being discriminating enough that your purchases reflect your values, sophisticated enough that your pleasures enhance rather than distract from your deeper purposes, and wise enough to know that the best things money can buy are often experiences, relationships, and opportunities rather than objects. Your wealth should serve your authentic self, not create an artificial self that you think wealth requires you to become. Number 11. Philosophy of action and strategic patience. Everything I've shared with you means nothing without action. Every principle, every strategy, every insight about wealth and wisdom becomes worthless if it remains locked in your mind rather than implemented in your life. But action without strategy is chaos, and strategy without patience is gambling. What you need is the rare combination of decisive action guided by long-term thinking. Machiavelli taught that fortune favors those who adapt their strategies to the times while maintaining their core principles through every change of circumstance. In matters of wealth, this means acting quickly when opportunities arise, but thinking slowly about the systems and structures that will preserve your wealth through decades of change. Most people get this backwards. They think slowly about opportunities, analyzing them until the opportunity disappears, then act impulsively about long-term wealth building, making emotional decisions that undermine years of disciplined accumulation. The wealthy do the opposite. They make quick decisions about tactical opportunities, but slow decisions about strategic frameworks. When you see a chance to eliminate high-interest debt, you act immediately. When you discover an investment that aligns with your strategic allocation, you move quickly to acquire it. When you identify a relationship or expense that's draining your resources without providing value, you cut it off without delay. These are tactical decisions that require swift action because hesitation allows problems to compound and opportunities to slip away. But when it comes to your overall investment philosophy, your asset allocation strategy, your approach to risk management, and your long-term vision for what you want your wealth to accomplish, you think in decades, not days. These strategic frameworks shouldn't change based on market movements, economic headlines, or short-term results. They should evolve gradually as your circumstances change and your understanding deepens. Think of yourself as an architect building a cathedral that will outlast your lifetime. Every day you make tactical decisions about which stones to place, which tools to use, which workers to hire. These decisions must be made quickly and efficiently to maintain momentum and progress. But the overall design of the cathedral, the vision that guides all those daily decisions, that should remain constant throughout the entire construction process. Your wealth building follows the same principle. Every day you make tactical decisions about spending, saving, investing, and managing your resources. These decisions should be made quickly based on your predetermined strategic framework. But that strategic framework itself, your philosophy of wealth and your long-term vision for what you're building, that should remain steady through market crashes, economic booms, political changes, and personal challenges. This approach requires a type of discipline that most people cannot maintain. The discipline to act quickly on clear decisions while remaining patient about long-term results. It requires you to be aggressive about opportunities while being conservative about risks. It requires you to be decisive about tactics while being flexible about timing. The greatest mistake most people make is trying to control outcomes they cannot control while failing to control inputs they can control. You cannot control market returns, economic conditions, or political developments. But you can control your spending, your asset allocation, your debt levels, and your approach to risk management. Focus your energy and attention on what you can control, and let time and compound growth handle what you cannot control. This philosophy extends beyond investing to every aspect of how you manage wealth. You cannot control other people's reactions to your success, but you can control how much information you share about your financial situation. You cannot control market volatility, but you can control whether you maintain adequate cash reserves to avoid forced selling during downturns. You cannot control inflation, but you can control whether your asset allocation includes investments that historically perform well during inflationary periods. The combination of strategic patience and tactical speed creates a powerful advantage over those who are either too slow to act on opportunities or too quick to abandon their long-term plans. It allows you to benefit from compound growth over time, while also capitalizing on shorter-term opportunities that align with your overall strategy. But remember, this approach requires you to have a clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish with your wealth. Are you building a legacy for your family? Are you creating financial independence for yourself? Are you accumulating resources to make a specific impact on the world? Your long-term vision determines your strategic framework, which determines your tactical decisions. Without that vision, you're not building wealth strategically. You're just accumulating money randomly, hoping that more money will somehow solve problems you haven't clearly defined or create outcomes you haven't specifically envisioned. The time for preparation is over. The time for action is now. But action guided by the principles we've discussed, action that serves a strategic vision rather than random accumulation, action that builds something lasting rather than something immediately gratifying. Your wealth is waiting to be built, but it will not build itself. Your legacy is waiting to be created, but it will not create itself. Your impact on the world is waiting to be made, but it will not happen automatically. Everything depends on your willingness to act on what you now know, with the patience to see it through to completion, and the wisdom to adjust your tactics without abandoning your strategy. The question is not whether these principles work. History has proven they work. The question is whether you have the character to implement them consistently over the years and decades it takes for them to transform your financial reality. That question can only be answered by your actions, starting today. There is a moment that comes to every person who truly understands these principles, a moment when you realize that wealth was never really about money. It was always about power. Not the power to control others, but the power to control your own destiny, to write your own story, to live according to your deepest values rather than the demands of circumstance. You begin to see money differently now. It stops being this desperate thing you chase and becomes this quiet force that serves you. You stop thinking like someone who needs money and start thinking like someone who commands it. Your decisions come from abundance, not scarcity. Your choices reflect wisdom, not fear. Picture yourself standing in a vast library that stretches beyond sight. Every book contains a lesson about wealth, power, and human nature. You realize you've only read the first few volumes of a collection that could teach you for lifetimes. Each principle you master opens doors to deeper understanding. Each boundary you establish reveals new territories of possibility. The people around you begin to change, or perhaps you simply begin to see them clearly for the first time. Some relationships deepen as they're freed from the complications of financial imbalance. Others fade as their true foundations are revealed. You discover that real connection has nothing to do with what you can provide and everything to do with who you choose to become. This transformation reaches far beyond your bank account. When you learn to think strategically about money, you learn to think strategically about everything. When you master the discipline to preserve capital, you master the discipline to preserve what matters most in life. When you understand the power of silence in wealth, you understand the power of silence in all forms of true strength. If you're ready to continue developing this deeper understanding of wealth and wisdom, join others who are walking this path by subscribing. Because what we've explored today is just the foundation of a much larger conversation about power, purpose, and the art of building something that outlasts your own lifetime. The student is ready when the teacher appears, but the teacher only appears to those who remain students forever.